Greetings, friends. Trump needs to ditch Ukraine as soon as possible. He cannot allow the war to ruin his presidency, because that's what's going to happen if he lets the neocons take over the direction of his second presidency. They will get him embroiled in Ukraine, whether in a light strategy of trying to keep it a stalemate, or a hard strategy of trying to go into overdrive and actually fight back, even though they don't have the resources to do that anymore. But either way, that's a neocon strategy. And I think the neocons know, or many of them know, that the war is already lost, that they cannot defeat Russia, but they want it to simmer on. They want to at least keep a flow of cash going in there, flow of weapons, more deaths of Ukrainians, maybe getting other nations to die there. If not Americans, then at least try to get some more Europeans in there, even though thousands of Poles have already died there. The neocons are okay with that because they realize that will disable Trump's presidency. So MAGA has to understand that the Ukraine war is something they need to hold Trump to get out of. These unnecessary wars, which cause untold suffering and don't benefit the American people. Trump has to get out ahead of this, speak to Putin as soon as possible, probably before he takes office formally, and agree to have negotiations. And he has to speak to the American people so that politically he can disconnect himself, disassociate himself from the conflict. Paint it as Joe Biden's. I mean, rightfully, it was Joe Biden's and the Democrats' conflict, although many Republicans supported it too. But it was their conflict. They wanted this, despite all the personal reasons. It was the global American empire, or the neocon, neoliberal agenda, to poke Russia, to expand NATO, to expand the global homo empire. And that's what they've been doing all around the world, but it's not working anymore. Now Russia's fighting back to preserve its own people, regardless of how many people won't see that. They'll just see it as naked aggression on Russia's part. That's not really the truth, although the truth is more complicated in the political sense. But basically, Ukraine is essential for Russia to neutralize. And they're going to get that done. They've already won the war economically in the first 6 months of the conflict when the sanctions didn't work back in 2022. That's when the war was really won in that sense. In the military sense, Russia won the war once they defeated the Ukrainian counteroffensive, which began in early June 2023 and was more or less over by the autumn of 2023. By that point, Ukraine would never be able to build a third or fourth army. I think that was already their second or third army that had been destroyed. They don't have the shells. They don't have the manpower. They're losing the morale. So the war is already over. It's just being wrapped up. I think it'll take at least another year. Trump has to speak to Putin, and then he has to address the American people and say, this was Biden's mistake. I'm acting for the best interest of the American people to make a deal with Vladimir Putin, because we want stability and peace in the world. And if people attack him for that and see him as weak for that, so be it. That's the only option. He has to be honest and do it early and talk to the American people as soon as he assumes office, and then pull the plug on Ukraine. And then Putin and him can have a real discussion about what are the borders of Ukraine going to be. And I think Russia will take up to the Dnieper River. I don't know, I could be wrong. I think they're going to take that. Possibly Odessa. Maybe that's a little too optimistic. If that doesn't happen, then they'll just take the Donbass territories, the 4 territories that they recognize as part of Russia already. However, geographically, it doesn't make sense to leave your enemy on the eastern side of the Dnieper River, which goes right through the middle of Ukraine. It doesn't really make sense to leave that to an opposing empire, the global American empire. It wouldn't really make sense. The river is the natural barrier. Now, if you take Odessa, then that's on the other side of the river too, but that is on the Black Sea. You basically landlock Ukraine. You leave it a rump state. Maybe Poland even gets involved and takes some of their former territory back in Ukraine, in Western Ukraine. There wouldn't be much of a Ukraine existing. That's what they're faced with. I don't know if that's actually going to happen to the full extent, but this, you have to understand, this is where it's going. If you don't make a deal with Russia, a deal which accommodates reality, which actually takes seriously the perspective that Russia has on these geopolitical matters. If Trump doesn't do that, his presidency is going to be hamstrung. He's going to be caught up in the same swamp, nonsense foreign policy that's been affecting every administration, going back to Vietnam or before that. It will drain money. It will drain the focus away from matters in America. And this is to say nothing of what he ends up doing with regards to the Middle East, with Israel and Iran. Of course, there's a Zionist influence too. But the real war is in Ukraine. The Middle Eastern stuff, I don't think there's going to be a war between Iran and Israel. Israel's too small. Short of nuclear war, you can't speak of a war between Israel and Iran, or even the United States and Iran. You can't really speak of that in the way that Ukraine has been fighting Russia. Because Israel's a small country. What can it do? It can fire some missiles back and forth with Iran, and then they talk about how they're going to do it, and then you send the missiles flying after you've been threatening to do that. That's so petty. That's so fake. That's not even real warfare. I mean, yes, it's a real thing, but that's like real warfare is like armies moving into the field, like battalions and tanks, like people dying by the hundreds and thousands, as terrible as that is. If there was any real war like that, I don't see how Israel could last more than a few weeks, or even like less than a week. It's such a small country. I even think if Iran did unleash a serious missile barrage, it would cause serious damage to Israel. Trump, he's caught up in these things. We can't be overly optimistic. He's going to be influenced in some of the ways of the establishment, the old order. He's going to be influenced that in some ways. We don't know in terms of the Middle East, in terms of Ukraine. I think, but he knows. He's not stupid. He must realize, and he has said things indicating that he realizes the direction of these things. He wants these things to be wrapped up. Is he going to be able to do it? I have faith that he may be able to do that, but it's extremely serious. The Americans need to remind him of this early on, because the first 100 days of the administration is the most important. Hasta luego, amigos.